You know, folks, virtually the entire left, and some never Trumpers from the right, they insist that Trump can't fire subordinates at the DOJ and FBI investigating him without that equaling obstruction of justice. They say he can't ignore their subpoenas, he can't pardon himself, and he can't reject judicial findings if those findings rule in favor of plaintiffs who might argue that he can't do any of those things. Now, when you point out that he actually does have the constitutional prerogative to do them all, albeit with some political risk, they just shout, hey, the president is not above the law, as if that's the final word on the matter. So you have to wonder, are they drunk, high, amnestic, or just constitutionally illiterate? Let's take a look at that. No, Trump is not above the law. However, his position as president gives him certain process rights in latitude under constitutional law as the head of a separated power. Now, the remedy for when, let's say, the Supreme Court rules against the executive and the executive refuses to comply, this is something addressed through House impeachment and subsequent Senate expulsion. Okay? Now, let's suppose the House refers to articles of impeachment to the Senate. And then let's suppose Trump successfully demonstrates in that Senate trial, as it relates to the case surrounding the Russian probe, that subordinates within his own separated power at the DOJ and FBI tried to transcend the law themselves under the trappings of officialdom. Then let's suppose he further shows that the Supreme Court reached beyond its separated powers when trying to uphold their efforts to essentially commit a coup. Guess what? If he survives that Senate trial, he wins constitutionally and therefore wins legally. Now, the president is the only one with the constitutional leverage to stop a rogue court, even if it's the Supreme Court, in its tracks. In short, and this is an impenetrable fact, the final word over the legal fate of the president does not lie with the ruling of the High Court, but rather with the ruling of the Senate. And you know what? On the gridiron of brinkmanship argument, this reality is unassailable. Now, in breathless denial, pundits love to bring up Tricky Dicky. They say, what about U.S. v. Nixon, 418 U.S. 683, blah, blah, blah. And how it found unanimously that President Richard Nixon was not above the law and therefore was compelled to turn over subpoenaed evidence. Folks, what's easily overlooked is that while the Supreme Court said Nixon had to turn over subpoenaed evidence, that never meant that he had actually lost his constitutional option to resist their demand. He just knew that he didn't possess the support in Congress to survive either House impeachment or Senate expulsion if he had. You see, Trump doesn't have that same dilemma thanks to the preponderance of leaked and released evidence illustrating the bad faith politicized acts of the DOJ and FBI surrounding the entire Russian probe. So, like it or not, the Constitution permits Trump to be as unrestrained as he wants within his own separated powers, as the other two branches, the legislature and the judiciary, are permitted to be within theirs. And guess what? This is provably accurate. You see, we need only look at the process for replacing a Supreme Court justice for this to be unambiguously verified. The Supreme Court and Congress cannot tell the president whom he can nominate. The president and the Supreme Court cannot tell Congress how it can confirm or reject that nominee. And finally, the president and Congress cannot tell that confirmed justice how to rule once on the court.